Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another round of sound. This is the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown, year number 25. I'm Bob Pompeani. We always have a lot to talk about. Tonight is no exception. Sidney Crosby still no deal. Why? We'll get into the Pirates and the fact that they're 7 games out of the last wild card. Big questions in the offseason, but the #1 topic tonight on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown will be the Steelers, who so far are 0 for 8 on their first 8 first-team offensive drives. Here to discuss is your panel tonight. We have the sports director of 93.7 The Fan, Mr. Jeff Hathhorn. The man keeps going and going like the Energizer Bunny. The newest member of the Pat McAfee team and also a WWE digital writer now. I'm waiting for the ladder match where you're on top, coming down at some point, because you know he's going to put you in that situation. Mark Kaboly is here, and back from Paris, France is Will Grace from the Associated Press. You did a great job covering. Bonjour.
Merci, merci. Shout out, early Wanda King shout out, Dream Team for her. Ratings up in Monroeville tonight. Let's go.
There we go. All right, I want to start with, we're going to do a lot of Steeler topics, but the first one we're going to get into is that word from Jerry Dulac today that Nate Herbig is going to most likely be done for the year, which means Zach Frazier, not that this is a surprise, I thought he was on his way to being a starter anyway, but the depth all of a sudden, Jeff, is really a question mark on the offensive line. You said something coming in here tonight about the physicality that you expected from an Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin team. We haven't seen much of that. They got bull rushed last night on their offensive line quite a bit. What about Herbig, and what do they do?
Yeah, especially on the ends. But, you know, you're right. I mean, Zach Frazier was going to win that job. Herbig is a try-hard. Guys love him. He loves life. He loves playing football. But that wasn't going to work at center anyway. I mean, Spencer Anderson is a versatile guy. McCollum is a decent backup if he becomes the backup at center. I think they do have some options. As for the physicality, man, that was the most disappointing thing to me for that entire game. I mean, passes are going to be dropped or plays missed or whatever, but the fact that they got owned on the line of scrimmage that wasn't great.
And Broderick Jones, Mark, was the one guy who got pushed around a lot. Now, you've contended that he's been wearing something. Is he injured to some degree?
Oh, I would imagine so. I mean, he had the elbow brace on for a long time during camp. But, I mean, a lot of people want to say because he should be at left, he's at right. This is a guy that played, 11 games last year, 12 including the playoffs at right tackle. That shouldn't be an issue at all with him. I'm not quite sure what happened yesterday, but it's a little bit concerning. Even going back to the first game, he wasn't very sharp at all, and they need him to play well. He is a star. I don't know what's gotten into him right now. Maybe it's just preseason. He's played a lot of snaps in 2 preseason games, too, so I'm not quite sure, but they definitely need him. As for that inside with Herbig being out, I think they had a little bit better be able to weather that storm because of McCormick, because of Spencer Anderson, who's a little bit underrated. But, you know, this was a healthy offensive line for 2 years, and all of a sudden, quickly, you got one out.
I mean, but, Mark, you sort of said the key phrase there, you know, it's just preseason. If 2023 did not teach us anything, it's that none of this matters. None of it matters. It's good for us because it gives us something to talk about before it counts, but, you know, the idea that, like, a new offensive coordinator, 2 new quarterbacks, a rookie center, a refangled offensive line, and no number 2 wide receiver was going to come out and go do what they did last year during the preseason was ridiculous. That wasn't going to happen. I mean, I think what we're seeing, and if I'm the Steelers, you got to almost have to go to like the Bill Belichick when he knew they were going to make the playoffs and treat like the first month like the preseason too. I mean, this is going to be a bumpy road for them. Their best case, I mean, if we're going to broaden this out, this is probably what it's going to look like for a while, and you want to just hope the defense keeps you competitive, and then by Thanksgiving they get it together. I'm not going to panic about 0 for 8.
I mean, I agree with, like, not to overreact to any of this to an extent, but I mean, Daniels and Jones played together for most of last year. I mean, there can be miscommunication. I get it. You got a new offense. You're trying some new things, but that to me was a little bit concerning.
Plus, there's an injury to Troy Fautanu, and you know he's supposed to be okay, but we saw him also get, you know, pretty much bull rushed a couple of times by Daniil Hunter last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. All right, I want to get into the quarterbacks. And again, I'm going to preface this by saying what Will said. It's early. We saw what happened last year, so that's a lesson learned. But Warren Sharp, who covers the NFL and does a pretty good job with his takes, had an interesting one about the Steeler quarterback situation. We're going to show that to you right now, and here it is. He says, thoughts on Steelers starting quarterback. That was some awful football by both. There is no winner of the Steelers QB battle. The preseason will mercifully end, and someone will start week 1. He'll probably get benched by October. There's a reason both quarterbacks are basically free. Sometimes you get what you pay for. Mark, your thoughts?
I totally disagree right there. I mean, there's a reason why Russell Wilson didn't produce yesterday, and a lot of it didn't have to do with him. All the things that Mike Tomlin preaches, the pre-snap penalties kill you. Make 3rd and 4, 3rd and 14, make 3rd and 5, 3rd and 10. Stuff of that situation. The sacks. He had 3 sacks in the first 4 series here. It's going to be very difficult for any quarterback to be able to be successful if you're put into that circumstance, especially with a small sample size. We're talking, 18 to 20 snaps these guys had here to be able to figure this out. I think it's way too early to just throw Russell Wilson to the side right now based on 20 snaps that we saw yesterday.
I mean, the idea that, like, there's a quarterback derby, come on. I mean, what are we doing here, man?
We know.
It's good. Again, it's good for people to talk about. Like, Russell Wilson is going to be the starter if he's healthy week 1. He is. Here, full stop. When he got introduced, and let's remember the day that Russ got introduced, the grin that Mike Tomlin had on his face, and we were all there, like, that is as oddly happy as I've seen him in a non-game situation in a long time.
He had the same grin with Kenny Pickett when he says he and I have a lot in common.
There's no chance that Russell Wilson is not going to be the starter week 1. There's no chance. But I would say this, Jeff. I don't know if we were sitting 10 feet from each other. When I watched Fields, the thing that concerned me is the book we saw on him early on is his processing. He doesn't process things as fast as guys. I know it's a new system for him, but there was a lot of, like, if my first read's not open, what do I do?
Well, he reminds me kind of a rookie of where they haven't gotten to the point where they're just reacting. Like, they're still trying to think through so many things. They're a step slower than what they should be. They've been talking all camp. They want to make it simpler for him. They want him to be able to just go and make plays. They're trying to rearrange his footwork back to the way he was at Ohio State. So I don't know what's swimming through his head. There is obvious talent. There is explosiveness in that body. I just don't know if that explosiveness is best suited right now for the Steelers at quarterback.
Based on what you said, playing off of what you said, it's going to be some ugly games early on. Guess what? You have to win with defense, special teams, punter, kicker. Guess what you can't have? Turnovers, right?
Right.
And who's more prone to turnovers? You're exactly right. It's Russell Wilson because you can't really trust Justin Fields right now.
His turnover ratio is remarkable for a guy who's top 20.
41 turnovers in like 40
Justin
games,
Fields,
right?
41 and 41.
Yeah,
and he had kind of a loose, fumble last night that could have resulted actually in an interception. We're going to talk more about this. And the next question will be for these gentlemen is, what do you do if you're Mike Tomlin in Detroit on Saturday? It's the last meaningless game, but do they have to get the first team out there to do something? We'll talk about it next. All right, we have one more preseason game. It's Saturday. You'll see it on KDK. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, kind of a rare start in Detroit. But normally you don't see a lot of regulars. My question to you, Will Graves, in this instant, because of so much uncertainty, do you have to play some of these starters, even if it's a third preseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to get some good juju going. You do. I mean,
Juju?
Hey, he's available. I'm just saying he's available. But I think you want to get some confidence with those guys. Even a field goal, one series, a field goal drive would be like, okay, everybody would sort of relax instead of having this anxiety over this pretty crappy one game of football spread out to week 1.
Yeah, I think you have to start. First of all, I don't think I start anybody on defensive note. Forget it. You need to have this offense clicking a little bit. And if it's one drive and a touchdown, yank him out. I guarantee Russell Wilson plays this game. I mean, George Pickens played this game, and they're going to have to show some success. And I believe he did that last year with Kenny Pickett. I mean, with 3 games, it's a little different than 4. He'll play him that last game.
Yeah, you want to have some good Washington before they play in that first regular season game, if we're going to name other receivers that are available in free agency. Listen, it doesn't matter, but it does, right? Nothing in preseason matters, but yet it does. You want to have some good mojo. You want to feel like at least you put a couple of first downs together. You feel something good. And you know what? It's changed because you've got all that time between the end of the last preseason game and the start of the regular season. I think that last preseason game isn't as worthless as it used to be because you want to have those guys.
Plus, you got 2 games on the road to start. You know what the end of the schedule looks like, is it's brutal as you go from November into December. So, Will, from that point of view, I guess I would do that just to get something going here. But I want to ask you about, since you mentioned Juju, you didn't mention Juju, but you said Juju. So what would you do in this situation if Brandon Ayuk is going to remain in San Francisco? It appears to be that way. Do they need help there, or do you like what they have?
If Brandon Ayuk was watching that game last night, and I tweeted this out, but he's got to be thinking, he must have texted John Lynch, give me a pen. You know, because like I would not be encouraged if I'm Brandon Ayuk thinking, well, that's the difference maker. And I still think, and I haven't been here for a month, so I'm going to weigh in on this real quick. If you trade for Brandon Ayuk, you're telling George Pickens, we are not going to sign you. How do you yeah, you're going to pay 2 receivers $30-35 million? No chance.
In a league
you got to pay
happy?
You got to pay a quarterback at some point.
I realize that.
You got to pay
All right,
Watt
so
next year, too.
so I just
And Minka.
I would rather have a happy George Pickens with upside than Brandon Ayuk, who I believe is a good physical player, but he's like a better version of Juju.
I think
So that's my point here. They need somebody else though, because Van Jefferson ain't it, Scotty Miller ain't it. They do need somebody.
I don't think you're going to have a happy George Pickens if he doesn't have one of those guys next to him, because I don't think he's going to get the ball as much as he wants to. So that's going to be an issue. But I think one thing that's gone overlooked from yesterday is, I mean, we've talked about the receivers behind Pickens, but there's a bunch of 3s and 4s there, man. I mean, Van Jefferson's and Allen Robinson part 2, you have a glaring hole in my eyes at that number 2 spot. And if you have to give up a little bit more to San Francisco to get Ayuk, at this point, I would do it.
Yeah, and I want to commend Pickens for how he's handled all this.
So
there's
far.
been no whining.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so far, but he could have.
Right, he could have.
And he's handled this very well. Listen, I think Ayuk does make them a different team. I think it takes them to a different notch as far as where they rank in the AFC, because now these Van Jeffersons and Scotty Millers and Calvin Austins become 3s and 4s, and now your receiving core is like, oh, okay, we've got weapons down at 3, 4, and 5 that we don't have to count on all the time, but we can intermix in different situations, and I feel better about this offense. So if you think you can win this year, absolutely. I don't care what's happened between now and when it first came out. I'm still hot on Brandon Ayuk.
All right, let's talk defense real quick, and that is Nick Herbig. Every time we see him, he gets out there and he makes plays. It doesn't matter the situation, the circumstance, preseason, regular season. So, Will, how do you try to get him more opportunities, knowing that you have Highsmith and Watt? And I know those guys once in a while come out of the game, but what would you do? Because he seems to be somebody who's ready to take a different role.
I mean, I would try to find, to be honest with you, I'd try to find chances for him to give TJ maybe even more of a break. I mean, I think TJ, maybe on first downs, you can have him in the game. You know, maybe TJ can become in certain parts of the game, especially over a 17-game season, make him a second, third down guy. On first down, let Herbig go in there and set the edge. I mean, I don't know, but it sounds crazy to say take TJ Watt out, but the guy, and I also think though, and I'm sure Mark and Jeff are probably a little more well versed in this than I am at this point, but like, you know, I think he's a guy that's good in 15 to 20 snaps, but if he played 60, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they're probably looking for. You're looking, Highsmith and Watt play about 80% of the snaps. I'm not very good at math. That means what, about 40% left, right? 20 on this side, 20 on that side, right? That's a good amount of snaps, and you're looking 25, 30 snaps a game. So I think Herbig will get his, right? Yeah. So I think that's where he'll fit in at. The problem is a lot of times TJ comes off on first and second down. That's not conducive of what Herbig does best.
Mm-hmm. Right, correct.
Yeah, and what he says he has is he understands it a lot better now, and he's just reacting to what we were saying about Justin Fields. So I think they can be confident in using them in whatever situation that he gets out there for.
All right, we're going to take a break on that note. Again, the game is coming up on Saturday. You should tune in. You never know what you're going to see, but they need something good, some juju going into their regular season. I just have to say that. When we come back, Pirates, what do they do in the offseason? Next. All right, we're back talking about the Pirates, who did lose today, but they won 2 of 3 against Seattle. Pretty good team. But before that, they lost 10 in a row, and they've essentially fallen out of all contention for a wild card unless something miraculous happens. But, Jeff, when you watch this team and what they have right now, I think it's pretty glaring that their offense needs a lot. What do you do in the offseason? And do you, first of all, if you keep the GM and manager, and a lot of people think that will happen, under what circumstances do you do that? Do you warn them? Do you tell them, I need to see playoffs or else you're all gone? What do you do?
Well, let's see how the season finishes out first before anybody makes rash decisions, because they had a 2-month run where they played really well and everybody got excited and forgot how flawed this team was, because I don't know anybody that picked this team. Yeah, I don't know how many people picked this team to have a winning record, yet now all of a sudden anything below a winning record is unacceptable because this team is so great. Well, no, it never was great. They have too many holes. They need to fix them in the offseason, need to fix them with trades. They saw some flashes. This offseason, they better spend. They've been telling us for years, They'll break it down, and when they're ready, they're going to spend. Let's see what they do this offseason.
I think they got to do a little more and spend. They got to find a position for Cruz too, right? Because we know he's not a shortstop. But I mean, they're definitely going to have to add something to this team in the offseason. They should have did it last season. You can't go bargain basement hunting for guys and think it's going to make a difference here. And we saw that it doesn't. I guarantee, though, Bob, that this September, when they have call-ups from bad teams coming up, they're going to call up some people. They got series against Miami and Cincinnati and Chicago. They'll win just enough to make you feel a little bit nice and fuzzy inside, keep Shelty and Charrington in the job, and we'll rinse and repeat all again next year.
Well, let's remember in 2012 when they were up, 13 over 500 when we got to early August, and they ended up finishing, 79 and 83. Bob Nutting told me in 2015 we were talking about this in retrospect, he came this close to firing everybody at that moment in time, and he did not. And then what happened? They made the playoffs the next 3 years, but they also They brought in Russell Martin, right? They brought in Francisco Liriano. They got pros who were not on the far edge of their careers to be contributors. That is a key for them, but I don't think, again, it's going to have to be in trade. We could talk about the problem with when you talk about Ben Cherington is, what is he actually being allowed to do? I mean, that's the bottom line.
It all starts at the top and trickles down.
So, Bob Nutting can say whatever he wants, but Ben's actions, trust me, if Ben Cherington had the money, he would go out and spend it. So to me, the Cherington stuff is I view him more as they're not developing hitters, right? I mean, that's the big problem right now. They don't have position players. They got a lot of pitchers, which is great. Maybe you have to trade a Bubba Chandler. Not that you want to, but maybe you have to if you want to get a guy of consequence on the market next year.
Let me say this quickly about Shelton. And listen, he's made some mistakes, and he deserves criticism. Jim Leland wouldn't win many more games with this team.
No, I agree.
Jim Leland lost a lot of games as a Pittsburgh
down.
Pirates manager, a
Right.
lot of games, when he didn't have talent. His Sunday lineups were laughable, but they were cute because his lineups the other 6 days of the week were unbelievable because they had a lot of talent. Managers are good because they have talent, period.
Right, and the talent comes from the GM, who can only do so much if he doesn't have the proper
How did he
wherewithal.
acquire Bonilla and how did he acquire Van Slyke? Trades.
Right.
Well, you got to do that too.
Well, they
You
traded a
gotta be
position
good
of
on it.
strength
Right.
and got.
That's right. Pena. All right, we have a lot to talk about in the next segment, which will be about Sidney Crosby. He still hasn't signed. They got a lot of time yet, or do they? We'll talk about it next, right here on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. All right, we're back talking about hockey. It's not hockey season yet, but Kyle Dubas has made some moves. Probably needs to do more. But this is an old team which got older with the acquisition of Hayes. And so I look at this, and I want to start with you. Sidney Crosby's right in the middle of this. Of course, they want him here. Looking back, they probably should have moved some of these other guys when they could have before signing them to longer-term deals, specifically Letang or Malkin, if you want to look at it that way. But Crosby wants to play, wants to win. He hasn't signed yet. Are we drawing conclusions there at all?
When you think about the fact that the last contract he signed 5 seconds after he was eligible to sign it. That was a long time ago, or much earlier in his career, coming off the concussions. I think his inaction is saying something. I don't think he's holding the Pens' feet to the fire. The guy's got too much class. The guy wants to be a Penguin, but he's also. And when we always ask him, Sid, do you feel like you've earned the right to have a say in sort of the way they go? And he always says no, right? He always says no. That's Kyle. But I think he's sort of, by not saying something here, he's saying something.
So, Dad, tell me again what a burner account means. You just don't see Sid. You don't see Sid
No,
doing that.
You don't see him.
And listen, everybody gets a little bit anxious, especially as camp every day draws closer, because you don't want to see Sidney Crosby be Franco Harris or somebody else that puts on another uniform.
I just can't see that happening. I mean, just the personality of the guy. I mean, he doesn't want the money. I would assume the money's not an issue unless the Penguins were lowballing him, which I doubt they would be.
No, and it's not an issue.
And it's not an issue. It's just, I mean, it's one of those things, just wait. It has to get done. Because I honestly, I mean, maybe we disagree. I can't see him in any other uniform ever.
I can see him getting the Ray Bourque treatment, maybe at the end of his career.
Bourque hadn't won one, though.
I know, but it's still, I think Sid has earned the right that if this looks like, what do you guys call the Generation X Pens and Sidney Crosby in 2027, I think that they have enough respect for him that they would move him if they, as a sign of respect. But I don't think we're not there yet, but the idea that this team's going to be competitive at a high level in the short term, it's not good.
We'll end on that note. Will they be competitive? Will they make the playoffs or miss it for a third straight year? Just generally, as we sit here right now with the roster they have.
It'll come down to the last week, and then do they get a bounce?
I like what Dubas does, man. I think they might be able to sneak in.
I mean, when half the team makes the league, they haven't made it the last 2 years, so I say they probably get in.
Power play needs to get better. No doubt. That's going to be the key. Meanwhile,
shoot the puck, Bob.
we have a shoot the puck. Hey, if you're in the market for a new vehicle, don't settle for anything less than #1 Cochran Kia's clearly better car buying experience. Why? Well, you can enjoy exclusive, clear-cut pricing where you get their most competitive offer up front. Take advantage of exceptional lease and finance rates, and you can choose from a lineup of nearly 200 new models. Experience clearly better car buying at #1 Cochran Kia, in-store or online at cochrankia.com. It's a saga that will never end. But will it this week? Real quick, Jeff Hathhorn, Brandon Ayuk comes to a conclusion one way or the other, yes or no?
Oh, I think he's going to start drinking some red Gatorade, which I think means that, no, it won't be done.
Is there any such thing as black and gold Gatorade? No. This is going to drag on.
Yeah, this sounds like this sounds like 2 days before this game one kind of thing.
All the way to the bitter end. Nick Bosa signed really
So did
close.
TJ.
So did TJ, right. All right, on that note, we'll see what happens. Join us again next Sunday night, 11:35. We'll have the end of the preseason, look into the regular season, and much more coming up right here on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. Thank you for joining us. Have a great week.
They do.